Headshot.
Whoa.
What's up, Nerfers, and welcome back to my channel, where today I'm excited to show you a pre-production early model of what might just be the most overpowered blaster of 2025. This is the brand new Sabre Abraham Nova. It's not even a final version yet. This is a fully CNC metal semi-auto HPA blaster made in conjunction with Spectre and compatible with either of Spectre's two different HPA cores. Now, when I say this isn't the final version of the blaster, in the time it took them to ship this sample to me, there's already been design changes. Notably, instead of all those screws, it'll actually have a 3-pin quick takedown functionality, allowing you to easily swap the internals between games. They can go between the DMR core and CQB core very quickly. And secondly, the buttstock is going to be completely different. You're going to have a line out or a bottle stock in the grip itself, and you have an option for an M4 buffer tube instead of this CNC metal stock that I've got on mine. Now, compared to something like the Sweetheart Storm or any other AEG blaster, this has all the benefits that HPA brings. So for example, despite this thing being fully metal, it only weighs 1.5 kilograms. So it feels about the same as holding a Nexus Pro, despite it being fully metal. Another huge benefit of HPA is simply the reliability of it compared to AEGs. To touch on that last point, I think the Milsig M79 really put a sour taste in people's mouths about HPA, but HPA is definitely far more reliable when done right than an AEG. There's just far less that can actually go wrong with it. There's far less moving parts. It's a much more simple design. This thing also runs at far lower pressures than the Milsig did. It can operate down to as low as 80 PSI for kid-friendly games with low FPS, or you can use it all the way up to 150 PSI for long-range sniping. On top of that, there's two different cores you can actually choose from to put inside of this blaster. There's the DMR core, which used to be called the Super Core. That's a high capacity closed bolt design that's designed for high FPS and can shoot over 400 FPS total. Or you've got what I've got inside of mine today, the CQB core, which is brand new. It was briefly called Sniper Core till they renamed it to CQB, because that is more fitting of what it actually is. CQB core is a lower volume core with an open bolt design, so you can easily take your mags in and out without having to pull them out. And it's also much faster in its response time, so it's great for your up close and personal, point blanking people in the face, all that kind of stuff. Now, I could have gone with the DMR core, got some higher FPS, but there's a couple of reasons why I didn't. So the event we're hosting today, we've got Conrad and Ernie from Sabre over here in Australia. We're hosting a 250 FPS game, but it also has a minimum engagement distance unless you're shooting below 180 FPS. So because this is a brand new design, I want to try out the new CQB core. So I'm going to be playing all the gameplay footage at 180 FPS. I will, of course, though, put the DMR core inside this sometime down the track and do a follow-up video showing you the maximum power output you can get from this thing. Taking a closer look at the blaster, keeping in mind it might change before release. It already has, after all. Up the front, we've got a 13mm ID, 16mm OD threaded worker barrel, which is 21 centimeters recommended for the CQB core, or 35 centimeters for the DMR core, just because it has a slightly larger air volume and more power. That is quick swap because of the thread. And up the front, I've naturally attached a Sabre B-Car rifling attachment for my accuracy mod today. You can, of course, use any rifling you like that's designed for a 16mm barrel, but being a Sabre blaster, I don't think there was a world where I was going to use anything else on this today. Moving back from there, you've got M-lock slots galore all over this thing. You've got angled one, side one for bottom rail here where I've got my grip on there. There's also a modified version of M-lock which they use for the top rail positioning, just similar to the locking nuts you find on this Sabre M20. So those are provided because they are a little bit different than your standard M-lock. And then you can put that pick rail wherever you like on the top there. The magwell on this blaster is much nicer than the one on the Sabre Apex Prime. It's loose enough that you can gravity drop the mags at any time, especially when using the CQB core. I'm not too sure with the DMR core because it does have a closed bolt design. It might just require you to actually pull the mags out with the DMR core just to get it over that bolt. For those of you who love CQB, you're gonna be using this core anyway. You can just drop the mags out nice and easily. Now let me go put my backpack on and we'll do some trigger testing. So in the timeline of this video, I haven't actually fired this thing yet. So let's give the trigger a pull, eh? Oh, that is a fast response time. Let's give it a bit of a burst fire. Jeez. You know what this reminds me of? You know in first-person shooters where they give you the FAL and they might program it that you can fire it as fast as you can actually pull the trigger? This is like when you map it to the middle mouse wheel. This can fire as fast as you can pull the trigger. Jeez. Keeping in mind that with the DMR core, that does 400 FPS. Now for the grip on this blaster, it uses an AR spec grip, so you can't actually use an AEG motor grip on this thing. They're actually too wide to fit on. So what you can do, you can go to your airsoft store or your gel blaster store and just find what's called an HPA grip, or even if you live somewhere near a firearms dealer, go get an AR grip that's designed for a real firearm, because that will fit on this thing. From my understanding though, this will actually come with its own grip that's designed to be able to attach a bottle straight on. So you can either have a bottle stock or an M4 buffer tube stock instead. For the connector, it comes with a Foster connector, same as airsoft and same as gel blasters. In fact, the tank and line setup I'm using today is the same exact one that I normally use in all of my gel blaster videos. This is a Gladiator, love the pun, 68 cubic inch paintball tank, and it holds 4,500 PSI when full. And my regulator can reduce that to between 0 and 160 with a turn of a hex key. That is how simple it is to adjust the FPS on a HPA blaster for kid-friendly games when you're down at 80 PSI, or adult games when you're up at 150. By the way, that upper ceiling of 150 PSI is mostly so you don't blow the air connection fittings, because that's what they're rated for. The actual core itself is stress tested a little above that. Now I reached out to the designer Spectre to ask how many shots I'd get out of this thing at different PSI settings. And at 80 PSI, so lowest FPS out of this thing, you'll get around 1,500 shots with my particular tank. You can get larger tanks. And at full bore, 150 PSI, you'll get around 800. So I do not expect to run out of shots today at all.
All right, I have used this blaster all day long. It's now around 4 p.m. We're going to check how much air is left in the tank. What does it say, Conrad? I can't see. It
says 3,500.
3,500 PSI out of 4.5 that I started with.
That's right.
So I could still use it for another couple of games.
Yeah, another day.
Like another day.
Yeah.
Anyway guys, that concludes my quick overview of the Sabre Abraham Nova. Now it's time for some testing. Okay guys, so before I start the chrono test today, I did want to quickly explain that with a mechanical trigger like in this model of the Nova, a light trigger pull might give you a little bit lower numbers than a firm fast one. So a little light trigger pull, you can hear it opens the valve a little bit slower than if you just pull it back nice and quick. So I'll just show you a quick demonstration of what that'll be like. Here is a firm fastball, 238 FPS, and now I'll do it nice and slow. It didn't even leave the barrel. There we go, 164. So with a mechanical trigger like what you'll find in this blaster, you do want to give nice firm pulls on the trigger. There will be an electronically controlled version of this coming out later down the line. Then you'll just have a tiny little battery on board, probably inside of the grip. By the way, please ignore the delay in the bolt retracting. It just needed a little bit of lubricant sprayed on the pusher O-ring. All right, so to start with, I've got it set to 80 PSI, so the lowest setting it can go. And I'm going to be using Worker 1 gram bamboos to start with, and then Sabre T-darts, which weigh 1.3 grams. So here's your standard 1 gram darts and what they're doing at the lowest power setting. 184, 180, 175, 175, 184, 176, 166, 182, 177, 174, 180, 190, 181, 191, 181, and that's all 15 shots. Swap to the heavier Sabre darts. Here goes. 159, 148, 154, 153, 152, 157, 151, 151, 151 again, 151 again, that's 4 in a row. 157, 153, 156, 160, 159, and that's all shots. As you can see, quite consistent at this low velocity. I'm going to turn it up now to about half power, 120 PSI, and see how it does there. All right, I've dialed the regulator up to 120 PSI, just that Allen key there. Again, starting with the lighter weight worker bamboos first. Let's see how they do. 240, 261, 266, 268, 264, 264, 262, 270, 272, 271, 256, 261, 247, 255, 258. That's all 15 shots. Swap to the Sabre darts. A little bit heavier, should be a little bit lower FPS. 230, 218, 236, 193, 194, 232, 239, 224, 233, 223, 223 again, 211, 169, that was a bit lower, 164, and 221. So at this PSI, the lightweight ones seem to be a little bit more consistent. Let's turn it up to 150 PSI for the maximum velocity. All right, I've got it set to 150 PSI now, so the highest it's rated to do. Mostly that is due to the airline connection here, which is occasionally hissing out a little bit of air. That might be a little bit too much for it, but they're just they're not actually made by Sabre, they're just a commercially available part. And that's what they're rated for, 150 PSI. Let's see what it does at the max power setting with worker 1 gram bamboos. 253, 291, 290, 287, 296, 282, 281, 288, 282, 297, 268, 275, 280, 272, 286. That's all 15. I think it might have dropped a little bit in consistency compared to 120 and 80, but that's what you're getting with a larger muzzle blast coming out the end of the barrel. All right, Sabre 1.3 gram T-darts at full power. 230, 256, 225, 282, 231, 248, 224, 211, 276, 248, 231, 222, 246, 223, 248, and that's all 15. I do think the Sabre darts, being heavier, are a little inconsistent in this blaster for some reason. Might just be the way HPA is, that it prefers the bamboo darts. Over the Chrono at 80 PSI, 1 gram worker bamboos averaged 179 feet per second with an incredibly consistent standard deviation of 6. Sabre 1.3 gram darts took that a step further and shot a standard deviation of only 3 with an average FPS of 154. Very impressive for a HPA blaster and on par with the very best springers. Stepping things up to a mid-range power level of 120 PSI, 1 gram worker bamboos are now averaging 260 FPS with a still very acceptable standard deviation of 8. Sabre 1.3 gram darts, however, weren't anywhere near as consistent anymore, getting a standard deviation of 23. Moving on up to the maximum power setting, 1 gram worker bamboos topped out at an average of 282 feet per second, with a still passable standard deviation of 11. 1.3 gram darts didn't improve in consistency, they also didn't get worse either, but their average bumped up to 240 FPS. After speaking with Spectre up in Queensland, he believes the inconsistency seen here is likely due to the inconsistency in size when it comes to workers' barrels. And Sabre already planned to solve that by machining their own barrels instead. Now keep in mind when it comes to FPS, this is all with the CQB core, and if you instead went for the DMR core, these numbers could end up being up to 400 FPS with the max PSI. I do believe DMR core can actually go lower in FPS than CQB core as well for your more family-friendly events, simply because it's a closed bolt design that can get away with lower operating pressures. Now you might have also noticed during the Chrono Test that the bolt took about half a second or so to retract after releasing the trigger. This is a moving part and needs to be lubricated, specifically that front O-ring on the bolt. It does get a bit sticky in the tight barrel, but after giving that a quick spray with some silicone gun oil, I did a rate of fire test with a full 15 round mag. Let's see how we go. So according to that timestamp, I was able to dump a full 15 round mag in just 2.5 seconds, meaning I was able to trigger finger this thing at a rate of fire of at least 6 rounds per second. Now Liam tells me that his cores can handle 15 rounds per second with a solenoid controlling it on full auto. So I guess I just need to get a bit quicker at pulling the trigger until I have a solenoid. Anyway, it's time now for the range test. I'm heading out with Conrad and Ernie from Sabre to go do the range test. In the magazine, I've got 5 Sabre T darts, 5 worker darts, and we're gonna go down the end of the road here where that checkered sign is and shoot back this way. You guys come with me, stand behind me, don't want to get in shot. Now this will be max range with the CQB Core.
Nice, sunny,
It's like a 3/4 moon. They won't see it on the wide angle camera, but it's quite nice. All right, I'm gonna do a 45-degree angle for max range. Here we go. There we go. That's all 10 shots. Let's go find them. Got the handy dandy rangefinder. We'll point that at the fence we're standing next to find out the range. I can see some. All right, what do we got first? We have a Sabre T dart and 3 worker darts, 4 worker darts, pretty much all the worker darts. Okay, 1 Sabre dart, 4 worker darts went 51 meters. We have another worker dart here, which went 58 meters. And then we have the rest of the Sabre darts. And they went a little bit further at 61 meters. So we did have one inconsistent from the T darts. I think it could be because of the dart gate we have in this has been catching him a little bit. That's being changed in the final version. So they will load straight in there rather than going in a little bit wonkier. So there we have it, 61 meters from this thing on semi-auto. We'll head back inside the field after picking up these darts. Okay guys, for the accuracy test today, I'll be shooting at a 1 meter diameter round target from a distance of 30 meters away or 100 feet for my American viewers. I have the PSI set to a good mid-ground of 120, so I figure it'll probably be more accurate than shooting at full power because all that muzzle blast will be coming out at the end of the barrel, giving you a little bit of turbulence. So hopefully this setting will be the good balance between power and accuracy. We'll see what it does, starting with 1 gram worker bamboos and then Sabre darts straight after. And the great thing about this being a semi-auto blaster is I don't have to cock it and re-aim between shots. So they should go pretty quick. That's a hit. So is that. A little bit higher. A little bit lower. About the same spot. Same with that. A little bit lower. A little bit lower. Nice. Nice. While they might not be perfectly zeroed, they are hitting in a nice grouping over on the right there. That one went in the center. That one went just above it. More to the right. And one in the low left. That is all 15 of the worker bamboos. Let's switch to Sabre T-darts and see what they do. High of center. High of center, almost in the same exact spot. A little bit lower. A little bit lower. Back where the first two shots were. A bit lower, it hits the cinder block. Dead center. High and right of center. Bit low and right.
Now, some of these darts were occasionally hitting the dart gate with their tip as they fed up from the mag. Speaking with Spectre about it, the distance can be adjusted when you assemble the blaster, so that's something I'll do down the track.
Little bit to the right. Little bit to the right. Little high and left. Little high and right. Little more to the left. Little high of center. That's all 15 shots. I don't know what it is with the Sabre darts, potentially that breech which has already been redesigned. They just are not quite as consistent out of this blaster for some reason. Normally in anything else, any Springer, they will easily defeat worker darts for accuracy. But we'll take you back inside and see how they actually compare.
From 30 meters away, worker 1 gram bamboos shot about a 60 centimeter spread, while Sabre darts reflecting the chrono numbers were about double the size. Considering that the barrel and dart gate will be completely different in the final design and actually designed by Sabre themselves, I suspect the Sabre spread will end up being better than the worker one at release. At least that's the case with every other blaster I've ever tested the two against each other in. Comparing this prototype HPA blaster against the top of the line Nerf AEG, the Sweetheart Storm. The Storm does have a slightly smaller spread with the same darts, but you do have to keep a couple of things in mind. Firstly, this model here has a mechanical trigger, so there is some shot variation introduced by how you actually pull the trigger with your finger. And secondly, this is ultimately still a prototype, and there will be a lot of improvements and changes made before release. Finally, HPA blasters like this one are far more reliable than AEGs are. There's just very little that can go wrong with them because of how simple they are. So I guess that's probably a good place to start my final thoughts on this early test model of the Sabre Abraham Nova. The first thing that comes to mind that I'd like to tell you is that I had absolutely zero issues with it firing or cycling throughout the entire 6-hour skirmish event. Whenever I pulled the trigger, the reliability was there that a dart came out every single time. More often than not, straight onto an enemy. And with a very small size and light weight, it made maneuvering the blaster an absolute breeze. The issues I did experience during the testing phase, I gave feedback on, and those things were already planned to be changed in the final version, so my input wasn't necessarily needed. The dart gauge, for example, this is currently using one of Spectre's because Sabre's just wasn't ready in time, and the final version will have more space to allow 38mm darts to feed up flawlessly. The barrels will be made by Sabre themselves to avoid the quality control issues from Worker. In fact, overall, the final version of this blaster will be pretty much an entirely different one than I had today. It'll be a CNC metal blaster rather than a folded sheet metal one similar to the Apex. It'll have 3-pin quick takedown so you can change the cores out between CQB and DMR. The grip will accept a bottle stock, or a line will come out of there so you can use an M4 buffer tube on the stock instead. So overall, this is a very early and very different blaster than what Sabre will be bringing to the table, and their goal is to have that finished by November so they can exhibit it at MOA in Taiwan. It's basically an airsoft show that I think is once a year or so. What that means is there's not really that long to wait to get your hands on one, and I for one look forward to testing the final version when it is ready. I will also test the DMR core sometime soon. As soon as I get my hands on one, I'll chuck it in here, as I would love to see how this thing shoots at 300 and 400 FPS with the closed bolt design. I would also like to see this go even lower than this one did today, because that's something else to keep in mind. You can use HPA at very kid-friendly events too. Anyway, overall, I'm quite impressed with what Sabre and Spectre have collaborated on here, and if the prototype is this good, I can only imagine what the actual blaster will be like. Anyway, I'm sure some of you are wondering what else Sabre's Conrad and Ernie got up to while in Australia. So, they both got to hold a drop bear / koala, if you're in on the joke. They learned how to use squeeze packet tomato sauce while eating sausage rolls and meat pies, all things that are exclusive to Australia. They fed wallabies and kangaroos, and they were even game enough to feed an ostrich. They got to meet Doug at Safari Zoomer Tactical, which is our one gel blaster store in South Australia, and they got to show him the Abraham Nova. Meanwhile, Doug showed them some toys of his own. Anyway guys, that is all for this video. Like, comment, subscribe, and all of that. Obviously, I think it goes without saying I have no links to where you can buy this yet because it's not actually made yet, but I expect that you'll be able to get it anywhere that you can buy an Apex Prime currently, and you'll be able to get it for around the same price, making it a little more affordable than its competitor, the Milsig M79, while also being vastly more reliable. Here's 2 other videos you might enjoy, and as always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.